Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, Massachusetts. Every time when I have somebody that's not from Boston, I like to say the best city in the world to just rile them up a little bit. Can you introduce yourself to my audience, please?
Hello, everybody. My name is Naya B. I am a licensed mental health clinician at the state of Missouri from Chicago, Illinois. So I don't know about Boston being the best, but I'll let her have it. This is her show, so she can have it.
You're so kind. You're clearly a therapist. Everybody will not let me have it. They're like, listen, you're like, you know what? You got some issues around Boston. You can go ahead and have your little city. This is
You can
hilarious. You're
have
the
it.
first person
I'm
to
not
let me
going to
have
debate. I'm not going to debate with you there.
it. Thank you so much for being here. So as my audience knows, I love storytelling. I love to learn how people got to where they are. As you being a black therapist, which is a very small percentage in our country, so I'm really curious to know what led you to this field. So you started off by saying you was kind of born in Chicago. What
Yeah.
was your upbringing like in Chicago?
So I'm a city girl. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I had a large family, or I say have a large family. So even though my grandmother was an only child, she had seven kids. And of those seven, five of them, went on to have children of their own. And pretty much we were all raised in the same house. So I had a lot of cousins and I had siblings. So I guess my cousins were like my siblings in a sense.
Oh, okay.
But I think as much as we like to party, there was a lot of chaos, which
Yeah.
ultimately led me to getting into this field. My grandmother was a teen mom, my mother was a teen mom, and then I was a teen mom. So there was this generational thing going on with us having children at a young age. And I think with all of that, it was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And I think part of that also was a lot of poor coping going on,
Mhm. Mhm.
just messages about womanhood and what it meant to be a mom. And there was just so many things. My mother struggled with depression, I believe. She wasn't technically diagnosed, but just watching her behaviors, I think she kind of self medicated. So she used alcohol and she was a sweet woman, but when she was drunk, she was very mean.
Right.
And I think some of that kind of rubbed off on me a little bit as far as being mean. So I coped a lot with anger. And I think the
Uh,
only thing that I really enjoyed through that aspect of it all was like I really enjoyed having control over other people, particularly men. So I would, I guess, use a lot of, I would use sex to control them for the most part, and, fight about it later. So it was like a really bad cycle of mine. And so as I got older and realized, like, okay, I have this son coming in, and I was a fighter, like in the streets fighting. I wasn't one of those people that talked about fighting. I didn't do a lot of talking. I did a lot of fighting, but I didn't do a lot of talking.
uh,
So,
can I pause you for 1 second?
sure.
So, because for some people, with like kids, because at this time you were a kid, a lot of times I tell parents that when children's behavior is changing or whatever, like the way you talked about your anger, and you would get unfortunately like canceled because it's like, oh well, you're just angry. But depression shows up in different ways, especially I feel like in black children sometimes. We a lot of time, I'm not saying that we don't, but a lot of times we're not like the textbook version of depression, stuck in bed, or it's
Mhm.
the anger, it's the acting out. Would you say that when you look back at your life, that's what was going on for you?
I don't know if it was. I always say that, of course, anger is a protective sadness. So
Yep.
there was definitely some disappointment there, but I think there were so many things that contributed to my anger, and I think part of it was just I just felt like a lot of things weren't fair,
Yeah.
and a lot of things just wasn't cool, especially growing up in my family as a dark skinned black woman. My
Mm.
grandmother used to do a lot of things like put bleach in my bath water, make me feel very different from everybody. So I had a lot of like, I was ready to fight everybody every day just because I felt like an outcast or like I was different.
Oh,
The only people that seemed to make me feel like I mattered on some level were
we're
older
men.
men in a sense.
Yeah.
So, that led to me being able to use sex as a coping skill
Yeah.
and at the same time be really pissed off at everybody else about everything else. So I never really emotionally knew how to connect to people when I
Yeah.
was younger.
Wow.
Um, I just knew how to control people and to be very matter of fact and to just do what I needed to do. I think as I got older, like in my 20s, that's when I realized, like, oh, I'm really struggling with maybe a little bit of sadness, just
What was
disappointment.
is when you talked about your manipulation, I'm like, wow, you were really smart at a young age. I say,
Thank you.
like, when kids are manipulative like that, when I see them, I don't see kids, but when would work in the emergency room, and I'm like, your child's actually very smart for to be able to do that. But it's not like all these changes are happening in the house, all this chaos in your house. It's not like somebody sitting down, like, hey, Naya, this is going on. Nobody's talking to you, so you're learning how to adapt to the environment by any, like you said, the protection piece by I'm gonna hurt you before you hurt me.
It
So
was
like
definitely survival.
protecting.
And then I used to watch my mom, my grandmother, the women in my family. I love them. I love them dearly. But I used to watch them just do some stuff, like play
Yeah.
some games. They were never really. They never gave me like damsel in distress, come take
Right.
me away. They were more of like they were the vultures. Like they were the ones that would break hearts. And I would see them mess over some really great men.
Mhm.
And then the ones that they truly loved, I would see them not get the best from them. So I
Mm.
decided that I wasn't going to be a part of any of it. If I couldn't control it, I didn't want it.
Do
And then
you
I had a son. So now it's like, I got to grow up. What am I going to do?
Do you remember that like pivotal moment for you where for you to say I'm struggling with sadness? I know, like, well, for me, I always told people I thought mental health was for white people. I didn't think it was a thing that black people did. And it doesn't sound like you grew up in a house where mental health was a part of conversation. So, what made you get to that moment of like saying the word like sadness? Because that would mean you would have to be vulnerable with yourself. And if you
Mhm.
angry, you can't be it'd be hard to be vulnerable with yourself.
Extremely hard to be vulnerable. I think it was when I left to go to college. One
Uh,
day I went to my high school counselor because my mother didn't finish high school. And nobody really did, to be honest. I mean, we all just kind of back then in the 80s and 90s, people they were grandfathered in with whatever trade they had. My mother was a
mhm.
stylist and she did hair, and so she had her own shop. Like she did a lot of different things without a high school diploma.
Wow.
And so my great grandmother was a seamstress. Like people had talent and skills, and that's
Mhm.
basically how they got by.
Mhm.
So in high school, the biggest thing was like, oh, okay, well, you have a baby now. You can have a baby. You need to go ahead and drop out, get you a job, forget about it. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't know if that's really what I want. But it was a lot of struggle because my son's father, too, he was very aggressive and he was into the streets. So as I began to try to do something different, he and I bumped heads more and more and more, which means, we were physically fighting all the time. And so back then, I didn't really think fighting your man was abusive. It was like, I was just fighting my man.
Mhm.
I didn't think anything was wrong with like, oh, fighting my guy, but I just got to the point where I wasn't happy. I was just wasn't, I wasn't happy. So I went to school and I talked to my high school counselor and I was just like, yeah, this is what I'm going through. I'm about to have a baby. My mother, alcoholic. I just told all the business, everything that I had ever,
You ain't
and
supposed to
in the
be
black
telling the
community, that's a
business.
no-no. Exactly. So
What's wrong? Where you must yo, by the time Naya got there, she must have been done. Like for us to like speak about what's popping in the house, that means you
Man,
you
I
had
told,
it.
and look, I went to a white woman and told a white woman, I'm
Oh
sitting
my
across from my school counselor. I'm like, let me tell you something. I am going through this, 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 this. This is how my mama talking to me. This is what's going. So she was like, oh my God, I would have never guessed. She was like, your grades are like perfect. She's like, you
oh,
might
you
get
did
kicked
well in
out for fighting
school,
or whatever,
even.
but your grades are perfect.
Oh, I want to say something
So
about that. So you see, Naya's home life was chaotic, but she said she liked control, and her grades she can work on controlling them. So that was probably one of the areas that you was able to maintain your control, which is pretty
yeah, I
dope.
think school was probably one of the safest spaces for me because it was the one place that I didn't have to really like fight anybody. I mean, I did because people would just kind of stare, and I was taught, somebody staring at you, you just knock them out. So I think back then, I enjoyed school. I enjoyed learning, and it was easy. It wasn't hard at all. Like I don't. People would say, hey, they're having troubles with this class or that class, I would not be in school for like a week or 10 days. I'd be suspended and come back, take a final. And you would think that I was there the whole time.
I
Like,
told you
so it
you
was
was
easy.
smart. I said that. It's
It was
before she
easy.
told me this. I didn't know this. This is my first time hearing this. And when she talked about the manipulation, I'm like, oh, you're a smart one. That's
And it's so
crazy.
weird because I lost my brother at an early age. My brother, he was everything to me. He used to tell my mother, and I didn't know what it meant, but he used to tell my mother, like, this is the brain. You think I'm smart. This is the brain of the family. And I would never know what he meant by that. And I would like, I didn't, a lot of times I didn't have to study. I didn't have to do much of anything. I could read something one time or hear something one time. And like, I wrote my first book in fourth grade. I was the only one who submitted a book for the Young Authors Contest. So that was my escape. That was my go-to before I knew what an escape or go-to was. Was me creating things and learning and reading. So she was like, I never knew you had all this going on because your grades, like, I was in the top 50 out of a class of like almost 500 students, and when I graduated high school. So she was like, you can go to college. You can go anywhere you want to go. I was like, nobody's ever told me about college. What's college? So she linked me to a mentor at that time. She was like, I think you need somebody else that's not in your environment, not in your
Wow.
circle, that can get you to where you need to be. And so, um, with that, I started to dedicate my time to being in parenting groups so I could learn different parenting skills. I
Wow.
was working full time. Like, I dedicated my junior, senior high school to just doing something different. I changed my friends. I stopped fighting. So ultimately that I ended up going to college, and as an elective, I took psychology. And that
Mm.
was the first time I heard about, you might be sad. You might be dealing with some things that you're just not okay with. And
Mhm.
that's okay. So as they began talking more about it, I'm like, I'm sad, my mama's sad, my grandma's sad, everybody.
You started diagnosing everybody.
I diagnosed everybody. And I say, how many people on my block? Because I know one
I
thing,
know.
substance abuse ran heavy in my family.
Mhm.
Drugs, alcohol, smoking dope. Like, it was nothing for us to just see somebody in a, we could look at, oh, you high. All right, cool. Well, we know we're not about to talk to you or deal with you today. When you
Right.
start to learn how to communicate with people who are high or under the influence at a young
Mhm.
age.
Yeah.
So I realized that everybody's self-medicating. Everybody's going through something and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to cope with it. They don't even know what it is or what's bothering them. And then
Yeah.
when you get to having conversations and people started normalizing things like, oh yeah, so and so touched me, or that person touched me too, or that
Yeah.
person, and it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? So
Yeah.
you once you get out the environment and you really start to learn other things, you realize that what you were in was like some very unhealthy stuff.
Yeah.
So I made it my commitment to myself and my community, my people, that I'm going to teach you guys more about mental health. I'm going to teach
Wow.
you what it means to be sad, what it means to be, why you're so angry, why you're self-medicating. You may not know why you keep going to the liquor store every day and
Right.
getting a drink. You may
Right.
not know why you need to smoke just to chill. You may not know, like, or there's some things that you probably were taught were okay, but in reality it was not.
Right.
But you didn't have anybody to tell that to. You didn't have anybody that you could trust. So I became that person for my community. I became that person for me, my family. Now, of course, it cost me some relationships in my family,
Of
and that was
course.
okay. But I didn't want it to be at the cost of my son's life.
Yeah.
His dad went to jail, and if I wasn't getting my life together, I was going there too. And I'm like, how do I help my child? How do
Yeah.
I do this? So he was part of my motivation and inspiration. I'm having a son. I don't want him to be in these streets. I don't want him to be like me or his father. I don't want to be angry anymore. I would go and visit my new friends, and they just seemed happy. Like, I'm like, oh, y'all nice. Y'all got a nice little refrigerator. Y'all can get ice and stuff out your refrigerator. Look, ice maker. And I was just like, this is so cool. You guys are actually doing things like going to dances and, getting dressed up, actually having boyfriends that's going to college. And, my boyfriends was in the streets, besides the grown men I was seeing. But other than that, I was like, I just need to get my stuff together. I want a different life. So
Wow.
I left, went to school, and that became my mission. I got my bachelor's in psychology and in sociology, then went on and got my master's in counseling and get licensed and
Hold on, I want to ask you
started a
that
private
before you got
practice.
your master's. I wanted to say to people, when we talked about the pivotal moment, the person that said something to her, got the mentor. I know things didn't change overnight for her, right? This is a podcast. We're doing it in a short amount of time, so she's kind of like walking us through the timeline. But I don't. I want people to know, like, when you say something to a child, it's so if you don't see the results in that moment, doesn't mean that they didn't hear you. But you're so smart, and I think you were able to like pick up on things quick, and so was able to like forward quicker than most people. But I just want to encourage the teachers, mentors, coaches, to not be don't feel defeated because you can't see the change. You may not see the change. You're a living testimony of being able to find and she listened. Oh my gosh. You know how many stories I heard where they didn't listen?
Yeah.
Oh man. And so like there are some good white people out there that will listen and help. So and the way that you was able to tell her, like, we ain't supposed to be telling people our business. So
Mhm.
for you to do that, and that was the first time I spoke to somebody about what was happening in my house was my senior year in high school. It's crazy. It's like a
Yeah.
white lady, a psychologist. I was dying because it was like when I look back, I'm like, dang, I must have been really going through it to tell this lady all this stuff.
Mhm. And what I like, and as I look back on it, what I admire most is that she didn't hotline me. She didn't call the Department of Children and Family Services. She didn't. She's like, "We're gonna help you just get through this. If this is what you want, what do you want? How do you want it?
Dang,
You
that's
can go to
dope.
college. Have you considered this? Have you considered that?" Like, she didn't jump in and judge my mom. She didn't jump in and try to take
Right.
anybody out the household. She
That
actually
part.
asked me, like, what do you want?
Yeah,
How do
that's
you want
dope.
that? I don't know what I want. So have you considered college? Have you considered you really great at volleyball? Have you considered going to play ball? Have you considered, like, I can't play ball, I got a baby. Okay. Well, what's next? On the
Yeah.
ACTs you scored this high in this area. So what about this? You have thought about this? You have thought about that? So, I was like, "Look, I'll apply, so I'm gonna link you to somebody that you might listen
That's
to more than
so
me,
dope. I
you know.
whew,
So,
and
and she gave me a black woman to mentor me. And
that's dope.
so, and
Mentors, you matter. I'm telling you.
yes, absolutely. And so she had been in my life for a very, 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 I mean, she's still in my life. Like, she never, I think she's been around my entire life, actually, since I was like 15, 16 when I had that conversation. So
Wow.
she was with me every step of the way.
And another point I wanted to you to elaborate on is when you said, "Of course, I lost people." You and I know what happens as you're changing, and a lot of people aren't going to adapt with that change. What was? I mean, now you can say, "Of course," but in the moment, was it like that, or were you struggling a little bit with the
Oh,
loss?
in the moment, it was really tough because you realize, like, the cost of following your dreams is ostracization. So you're going to miss out. People aren't going to invite you to things anymore because they think that you think you're better than them because you
It's
don't do the same
crazy.
things
I know.
that
I
you used
hate
to.
it.
So instead of me getting on people's level and cussing them out and fighting them like I used to, I'm like walking away. I'm getting my baby and I'm leaving. Or they're like, "Hey, can you loan me this so I can go buy a drink? Or can you loan me that so I can go smoke?" No, I got to get my baby something. I got to put gas in my car. I can't support your habit. I can't. So now I'm the enemy because I'm preserving what I have for me, and I'm not coming home as much for holidays anymore, and I'm not, participating in things anymore, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I would, of course, be at home and have my silent cries and figure out what to do. And thankfully, my school had a community of other parents who didn't go home for the holidays or didn't do different things. So
Nice.
I found that to become my new quote unquote family. So my son, he didn't get the traditional grandparents, he didn't get the cousins, he didn't get, and so I would tell him, like, "I'm sorry that you got gypped, but it was either that or ruin
Yeah.
your life,"
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. I wanted something different. So I stayed away. I'm still away, actually. I mean, I go home and visit a lot, but I hang out in the environments that are more conducive to my growth. I still don't talk to certain family members. My mom just passed in June. Our relationship was not the best, but I became more of her caretaker than her friend. So I just
Yeah.
made sure she kept a roof over her head, food, because she still used and drank, and so, you know, that was my role, and I was okay with that. I may not kick it with y'all, I may not get invited to the cookout, but this is my existence, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
is. So,
Yeah. Naya, Naya does a lot of, and we'll get into that next, but she talks on Instagram and has several books. You're really good at teaching and explaining things when I watch your stuff. Tell people why environment is important because, you went from one extreme environment to another environment. And you said that you said this in numerous ways and different ways about your environment. And people may not understand that, but why is environment important if you're trying to get to a different level in life?
because it controls the way you think. It
Mm-hmm.
controls how you see everything. Perception is everything, and that's
Yeah.
real. And what I learned along the way is that we argue about things like racism, we argue things about religion, but the reality is there's a difference in mindset that sets us apart from everybody else, not our skin color, as it is
Mm-hmm.
mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're in certain environments, you know what they say, you sit and shit long enough, you get used to the smell. So
Yep.
you got to decide
Yep.
what you want to smell like at some point. Because
That's
if I'm
good.
sitting in an environment and I don't see that everybody around me are drug addicts, I'm eventually going to be a drug addict
Yeah.
before I become their savior.
Yeah.
People will bring you down before you pull them up, no matter how strong you think you are, no matter how smart you think you are. People don't like to feel left out. So if you're in an environment where everybody's doing something different, chances are you're going to be doing what they're doing before they start doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. That's good. Thank you. So now you got the bachelor's in psychology or sociology?
Yes, both.
Uh, okay, psychology. And then, because, I got my bachelor's in psychology, but I was like, if I'm going to do something, I got to keep going. Did you go right
Mhm.
away or did you take a
I did
pause?
right away. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
right
because you're
away.
smart.
I
It
did
was
not
meant for
pause.
you.
I did not pause. I was, like I gotta go, keep going, keep going. So I started internships early. Like I always knew what I wanted to do, and I think that made it easier for me to jump into the
Yeah,
career path. And I would tell people, even the young ladies that I mentor now, whatever you do, you gotta stay in the experience of that because if you get the degree and you don't get the experience, it's gonna be harder for you to
yeah.
find your niche. So put yourself in spaces to where you can get the experience that matches the degree,
Mm-hmm,
especially
mm-hmm,
in psychology.
mm-hmm, hmm.
So that was
Um,
always my path.
did you go to a school with other black students?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I
Oh.
did, but I didn't. So I went to, PWI for both undergrad and grad.
Mm-hmm,
So there were, bits and pieces of Black Student Union, Black Student Association, but no, it's not a total Black student body. Part of that was because I didn't really want to go anywhere with people that 100% look like me because I grew up with people who 100% like me. I needed to know how to be around people who didn't look like me. I wanted to
mm-hmm,
learn different ways of understanding the world. And if I stuck around people who thought like me all the time, I wouldn't learn anything. I wasn't
mm-hmm,
growing. And it wasn't anything against my people because people are like, oh, you a sellout, you go to school, white people, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I'm just trying to learn something different. It's not so
mm-hmm,
much as that I want to be white or I care to be white, but I want to know how to utilize the resources. I want to know what the difference is between what they get and what we get. I want to know just how to, especially if I'm going to be in this field, I need to learn how to work with everybody, not just
mm-hmm,
my people. And a
mm-hmm,
talented clinician is someone who can talk about everything, who can be
mm-hmm.
about everything. And I started treating eating disorders. I'm like one of the few Black clinicians that treat eating disorders. And people think that,
Dang. Yeah.
it's a white person thing, and it's like, yeah, no, there are a lot of Black people with eating disorders, but they don't notice what they're struggling with. So I knew I wanted to be well rounded, and I didn't want my son to be limited to just being Black. Like
Yeah.
you are a Black person, but I want you to be diverse. I want you to know different things. I want you to experience different foods, different cultures. I want you to know that the world is bigger than you. And if you
Yeah.
are just limited to what you know and your feelings and your ideas, you're not gonna make it that far in this life.
That's a good point.
So uh, I, I, and to be perfectly honest with you, I said to myself, if I can survive in my environment where I'm constantly fighting and getting into it with people, I know I'm gonna be okay in an environment full of strangers that don't know me, that's never experienced, and the mindset of being in a college town and being in a town with other professionals. Everybody's going somewhere and doing something, so it's not taboo to help. It's not
Mhm.
taboo to give a resource, to network, or to.
Yeah.
So it's a different environment because nobody's
Yeah.
really competing with you.
Mhm.
Everybody's
Mhm.
cooperating because we all in the same boat. We all trying to get out
Mhm.
of school. We trying to graduate. We trying to. So you help me, I help you. So I had so much help with childcare. I had so much help with people who could find me jobs and know somebody who knew somebody who. So it was totally different. There wasn't this. I'm not gonna help you because I don't want you to do better than me. I'm not gonna tell you where I got my outfit from because I don't want you going to buy it. It wasn't none of that. It was, oh, you need, okay, here, I got a random gift of $300 my first year just because someone's like, I'm married and you out here raising a baby by yourself and it's hard with me and a husband. So my hat goes off to you. Here's $300 for Christmas. I don't know what you're gonna do with it, and I just watch you every day take this baby to and from daycare. It was a stranger,
Damn.
So the mindset was just completely different. I thought, oh, I'm staying right here.
Staying on the side of the streets. Wow. So yeah, because it's so interesting, in the Black community, because I always say the people, like the few people who like block doors, or were Black women for me, and there was some white women that like kind of opened some doors for me, and it's important to understand people, because we don't live isolated. We don't live alone and by ourselves in our own
Mhm.
space. And like you said, it's the mindset that really kind of affects us. And when I see people bickering on online and things like that, and I'm just like, we're not listening, we're not learning. And when you grow up in an environment for so long, that's all you know. So it takes people time to like unlearn, especially if there's some kind of unhealthy or toxic ways that you've been exposed to life. To unlearn it, it's not going to happen overnight,
Right.
because you're so embedded. It's so embedded in you. So again, that was an intentional process on your end to even do that, knowing that if I go back, I might be back to where I was. To be so young and so knowledgeable and wise is truly amazing, honestly.
Thank you. I just figured that if I would go somewhere where everybody knew me, I probably wouldn't get anything done because I'd be too busy socializing, fighting, and arguing
Mhm.
about stuff that was really insignificant. So I was like, I need to go somewhere
Wow.
where it's not too expensive. I don't know anybody. I am just learning everything. But it was hard. Oh, it was
Mhm.
hard. Like my freshman year, I failed almost every class I
For
had.
real?
Oh yeah, I got put on academic probation, suspension because I had no support. I didn't know what I was doing. I was definitely smart in high school, but in college it was like, girl, you need to figure it out. But that's what I realized, that emotionally I was challenged. I was
Ah,
challenged. So, and those emotions was coming up so much because now that I'm not in the environment, I can sit and reflect, and now I have time because the brain's primary function is to protect you from chaos. So when you're no longer in chaos, it can function, it can operate, it can process. So now I'm not in chaos anymore, and it's processing. It's processing the losses, the grief, the anger, the mistreatment, the feelings of unfairness, and so I can't focus in class. I'm a single mother. His father went to prison. I'm raising him by myself. Like everybody says I'm a sellout, so it's like I'm not accepted by my people anymore. Not quite accepted by the white folks for real, 'cause they're trying to figure me out too. So I'm in the middle. Like where do I stand? I don't fit in anywhere. I don't fit in anything. So that identity process had to happen, and it was tough, but I got through, and
that's good.
made a
And
way.
for people that like who don't get it, so obviously Naya gets it. The way she explained it, of the environment and why it happened. And I tell people, it's like when you're trying to work on change, you're essentially introducing a foreign object to your life. And I tell people, when you get a fever, it's your body trying to fight off the fever, right? Even when you get a good heart, your body may try to fight off the good heart, even though the bad heart wasn't working well. It was still what it was used to. So when she talked about failing all of those classes and realizing, making the connections to struggling emotionally, of course, it's like when you look at it, why wouldn't I struggle emotionally? I'm in this whole new environment. Your system goes through shock. And a lot of
Mhm.
times people stop the process because of the shock that their body's going through. And I would really encourage people, as you're working on change, understand that it may feel hard the way Naya is expressing it.
It was challenging. And I did fail some courses, but luckily there were teachers, professors who believed in me. I remember I got put on academic probation and I begged my teachers. I was like, listen, I know that this has been tough. I know what my GPA said, but listen, I cannot lose this. So they ended up deciding to change my grades temporarily, pending that I get myself together and make the grades that they actually changed them to. So that put me in college an extra year than I had planned on, but it kept me there. And then I swear I never got another bad grade. I don't know what came over me after that, but I never got another bad grade again. After that, it was like, okay, straight A's and B's. So I finally graduated with a decent
Dang.
GPA. And I made the grades up that they, changed them to. So of course I had to stay. Instead of me graduating in 2002, I ended up graduating in 2003, and then after that went straight to grad school, and after that got licensed right after grad school. It was just it. I didn't stop. I did not stop. I just
It
kept
was your
going.
coping
So
mechanism. Oh, I wanted to say one more thing too about what Naya said about the Black community and the food thing. Food is part of how we cope. When we gather and we eat. And so a lot of times we don't recognize that we're developing or helping our children develop unhealthy habits with the food, because food is not something that is it's not like illegal. It's not something you got to be 21 and over to buy. So I can see how it can go under the radar for people. So
mhm.
I
I mean,
appreciate you bringing up that
obesity,
point.
emotional eating is definitely part of the eating disorder community. Or
Hmm.
deciding that you're only going to eat one piece of food at a time, or I'm only going
Hmm.
to, my food can't touch, or those are all examples of like disordered eating. Or if you just say, I'm going to just chew ice all day long, or, that's a form of fluid loading. Like there's so many things that goes on in our bodies with food that we don't even recognize, but it's how
Yeah,
we cope. And we think
yeah,
it's no problem because we're like, oh, it's just food, or oh, it tastes good, or oh, it's, but it's
yeah.
contributing to an eating disorder for sure.
It's not an area I'm well versed in, but over the years of realizing with some people where I felt like I was missing with some clients, I was missing out, like there was some barrier, and coming to understanding of the food thing. Now I'm like intentional about asking those questions. I don't think it was something in school that was really a highlighted topic, but it's a huge thing that, especially now, that's happening for people. So I'm like extremely intentional about bringing in, like, what is your food intake is looking like,
Hmm.
just to kind of like not miss it, because we can easily miss it if we're
Yeah.
not looking for it, because it's not something that's standardly asked,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I always ask the question, obviously, because I'm like, I want to know. And typically, my question is like, what's your relationship like with food?
I love
Because
that.
there is a relationship with food,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll tell you, like, I either restrict it, or I overeat it, or I don't eat it at all, or, it's a loaded question, but it definitely is one that's helpful in getting me to learn how people see food in their life.
Yeah, that's really good. So you got your license, and now, during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, you were actually teaching, right?
Yes, yes. I was
What
teaching
was that like for
sociology
you?
and family. I loved it. Like
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed teaching the students about just the dynamics of family, how we got here, the difference between
yeah.
traditional, non-traditional families, just marriage, dating, just the whole process and idea of just things that were happening in the history of just families, how families developed, how families are important to this country, and the well-being of ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, so it was really, really great. Plus, I added things in there myself that they didn't know about, things that they didn't understand. I
That's
taught them
right.
how to do genograms, and taught
Nice.
them, the importance of looking at the family relationships and dynamics. And so that is definitely something that I really, really, truly enjoy doing. So
Nice. You're good at it. You're good at teaching.
thank
Now,
you.
the pandemic, you're welcome. The pandemic happened, and I never knew that there was such a small percentage of Black therapists uh in the country. And so you're a unicorn. And what
What are
was
you, sis?
what was the now that we're in 2022, what are you seeing now? Like what are you noticing that's happening for people with mental health? Because I feel like there's a huge mental health crisis happening. And before you leave, I'm gonna ask you what your self-care routine looks like, because we were in the pandemic trying to process and help people through the pandemic, which and all of the things that came, which was extremely challenging. But what are you seeing now in 2022? Like what trend?
I started when I started. I guess technically I've been in this field for 21 years. I've been in private practice for 11 years now. I saw before a lot of people were coming to therapy because they truly, really had things they wanted to work on.
Mhm.
They One of my contracts is with the state, so I'm contracted with the state. So a lot of the kids that going to foster care or been adopted, I am the mandated therapist or the corporate therapist, and for the parents as well if they want to get their kids back. So I had to make a lot of decisions on whether or not people were fit, to get their kids back or
Oh,
to
wow.
increase visitation or to do. So that was a big part of my practice for a long time. But what I've seen over the years since the pandemic is that insurance companies have made it easier for people to get mental health care. And of course, that increases my referrals, increases. So I've seen this increase
Mhm.
in referrals through commercial care. Um, for people who are struggling with a lot of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, people are actually
Mhm.
talking about their problems these days. People are
Yeah,
actually saying, "Okay, I'm
that's
tired of hiding it." And I think there's this big mental health care movement where you see people are now saying, "Go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy." There are some people who want to really truly heal, and there are some people who just want to let their going. They're
yeah,
not really actually showing up in the
yeah,
session.
yeah,
So I've noticed that people are definitely more overwhelmed. People are definitely poorly coping, and their thought processes has contributed a great deal to what's happening in their world a lot. And the messages that they come with, the things that their families have taught them, they're learning like, oh, I learned that when I was a kid, but that wasn't the truth. That wasn't helpful. That wasn't.
yeah,
But then they don't want to betray their families and disown those values or disown those beliefs. So they're stuck in
yeah,
themselves and they have anxiety now and they're panicking and they have this fear of losing everything they have or dying because they can't see their loved ones or they can't be around people with COVID. So it becomes coping with one of the most loneliest, illnesses to have. So it's a whole lot of things that's going on with people. I would say people are just everybody's going through something. Everybody.
yeah.
I don't care what it is. Everybody's going through something.
Yeah, I do know. I do feel like people are more vocal about what's going on. And now that there is this mental health movement, but there's not enough people to see them. So I'm big on encouraging people to not stop the process to find community. And I love the fact, well, what you said about people trying to like detach what they've learned, and the fact that our thoughts are keeping us stuck. I say that all the time. And I think about like when you talked about your grandmother putting bleach, that's just one of many things that you've experienced. But imagine like not feeling beautiful because of something you can't change and because of what somebody who's your caretaker is telling you. Like that's trauma, that's hard, and that gets
Mm-hmm.
embedded in you from a young age, and then you're a whole adult not feeling beautiful. um
Yeah.
and so like these are the things that people are dealing with. That was very overt and tangible, like it was clear, the connection, like, but there are some things that may not be so clear, right, that may be backhanded, that have happened over the years. That it's so interesting when people share this story and they talk about what's going on now. I'll say, oh, make the connection for them. And they say, but that was 20 years ago. And I said, oh, so you weren't part of the experience, the audacity of us to think that we can like not think about what we experience. It's always gonna be a part of us. We can't escape it. So we got to reconcile with it. And we don't know how to do that. So I'm happy that you're out here in these streets helping people through the process.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying. And I think what helps is that, when people truly get to know me, and that was one of the reasons why, I wrote my books because, in school they teach you, transparency is just not it's not helpful to the client. They say telling about yourself doesn't help the client at all, so you're not supposed to say anything. And I'm like, okay, try that in the hood. Try that with the black
For
population
real.
because they gonna ask you some stuff and you better answer because if you don't, they getting up out your chair and they walking up out your office, right? So and with my practice, it was in home. So I made home calls. I made, house calls to people because sometimes they didn't have transportation, especially if they had Medicaid or if they want fixed income. I didn't want them to have to worry about how am I going to get to my therapist? How am I going to see? So my practice was strictly mobile. So they were my interns, me, we were going to people and sitting on their couch. And I think that's what made my practice such a hot commodity. And when you sit on somebody else's couch and somebody's grandma asks you, how old are you? How many kids you got? Because you like you can't be no more than 15. If that's just how the grandma talks to you. You better be ready to answer some questions, right?
I
So
know.
you sitting around, you want to do couples therapy, they gonna ask you, You in a relationship? You married? But you coming up here telling me my business? You better tell me something about you, and that's part of the culture. So I
You're so
decided
right.
that I was going to become non-traditional in that way, become
Yeah.
show myself as human, transparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't change the knowledge or the skills that I have
Nope.
to give you or provide to you. It actually builds the trust that we need in order to get us to the next level in this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So I wrote my first, well, it wasn't my first book. My first book was actually,
Fourth grade.
right.
Come on now, Naya.
So I guess technically this was my third book, because then my second book I wrote about how to let go of unhealthy relationships. It was called The 14-Day Love Diet. And I talked about how, breaking a habit in so many days is, doable, but you got to be consistent, stick to it. And so I,
Yeah.
correlated that with getting over a bad heartbreak or getting through a situation. Most people, they can't get over heartbreak because they're still entertaining the relationship.
Hmm.
So if you give yourself 14 to 20 days of the habit of entertaining you and not the
I
relationship,
love that.
you will you can deal with you can get through the heartbreak a lot faster than you think.
Yeah.
So that was my first book, and it came with a journal, a diary, instructions on what you were supposed to do for each day of the
That's dope.
of the diet. So then, so that after I didn't have it in print anymore. So I was like, you know what? I think it's about time I started telling my story. And actually, what motivated me to start telling my story was I got married. So I didn't realize that I had more issues until I got married. And I said, oh, I don't even know how to be in a relationship. I know how to
I,
be next to somebody, but not with somebody. And it
I
was
know.
totally different, right? I say they didn't teach me much of nothing. They taught me they taught me how to stand next to somebody, but not really be with them.
That's where
We
the
can really
trauma, when you deal with
yeah,
trauma, I tell people it shows up in relationships.
yeah.
It
I
definitely
was
does.
running that poor man's life. I said, you know what? I need to sit back and sit down and figure out, let me start from the beginning. Where did this go wrong? So I started writing my life story from my first memory down to my last. And so that started
That's
the
where the
first book.
memoir came.
Yeah.
Okay.
That started the first
Nice.
book. I was trying to figure out, like, why am I, and this was my first marriage, obviously. And when you get going through a marriage and you realize you have intimacy issues and you controlling, and I'm just like,
To
this,
admit it?
he's holding up this mirror, like, girl, you suck. I'm like, you know what? I think
Yeah,
I
to have to
probably do. Let, let me let me sit down and think about this for a second, because that wasn't nice. And so it took my friends too. They'd be like, you did what? That wasn't healthy, sis. You didn't. I'm like, you know what? You got a point. Let me sit down and try to figure this out. So it got me some therapy, and I started writing my book. And
Nice.
so that became the first 94th and Racine, The Roots of Me. And so I wrote from my first memory, just age 5 or 6, all the way up until age 18. And then I started the second one, which was The Growth of Me. And that was my transition from leaving Chicago and trying to, navigate college. That was from ages 18 to 38. So now, oh, sorry, 18 to 28. So then now I'm finishing up the evolution of me, because I feel like on many levels I've arrived. Like now I'm in my practice. I'm, working on my mental health. My son, I've raised him. He's 20, he'll be 26 this year, and he has his master's in mass media. And,
Wow.
so he's doing a lot of great things. So now, and I have to learn how to love. Like
Yeah.
now that I'm out of survival mode, because once you're out of survival mode, you see the
Yeah.
world differently. You're not fighting for
Yeah.
the same resources anymore.
Yeah.
You now can practice empathy. You now can look and see the world outside of yourself. You're no
That's
longer
good.
selfish. It's no longer about right here, right now. You can wait a little bit on some things. And that's what the evolution is about. How I learned to love, how I learned to wait on
So
some things,
good.
how I learned to be less right here, right now,
Yeah.
and apply the lessons. So that book I'm currently finishing. I don't know when I'm gonna finish it because I got so much going on. But idea was to be done in December of last year, but that didn't happen. My mom passed, and it just took a detour on the writing, because now it's hard to write about the impact that she's had on me. Now I got to write about
Right.
the impact of her death, and now so it just slowed me down a little bit. But that's pretty much what the evolution is about. So that technically would be like the fourth or fifth book. I don't
Yeah, we
know,
can't
but
forget
yeah.
about the fourth grade book, girl. Come on now. Yeah, people ain't in these streets
And
writing books in the fourth grade.
listen, the fourth grade book was called "I Didn't Do It." It was a book about a liar, like how she got away with just lying and using manipulation so much. And so I like literally won that award. I drew my own pictures and everything, and it's like I
Wow.
used cereal box as the cover of the book, and then I like put newspaper around it and drew pictures. And I was
You're so
like, okay,
creative.
that was my therapy. Like that was just, it was
Wow.
an escape. It was a getaway. I would imagine myself as like somebody else, but writing,
Mm,
the truth about myself, if that makes sense. Like
yeah,
I would
it makes
write
a
the
lot of
story
sense.
and like I would tap outside of myself and just say, okay, this is that person. Because I was big on like,
Yeah.
if they ain't see you do it, you ain't do it. So the title of the book was I didn't do it. And that was
Oh,
that.
I just want to point out one more thing before we learn about where people can find you. I just want to tell people one more thing, something important that you said. Naya learned how to escape to get through things, and that's pretty common with kids. Um, but sometimes when we become adults, we still keep that same kind of mindset, and we struggle. The things that we that helped us cope, that was good, like escaping in that way. That's actually pretty dope, right? But as we become older and we have more responsibilities and we have these goals, and when we're finding ourselves trying to escape and we're distracted, and then we find ourselves stuck. And I always tell people, like, I get that, whether they're struggling in their relationship or whatever it is, and they find themselves distracted. I said, you have to understand your body was protecting you with that coping strategy, right? Like, but you have to remind yourself that you're no longer in that survival mode, and that you can, it's okay to come in the now. A lot of us have been unsafe in our body over the years growing up, and so why wouldn't we want to escape? And if we don't reconcile our system, our mind doesn't have concept of time, so our system still believes that we're in this like mode of fear and fight, and that we have to keep going. And so if we don't like really get in touch with our inner self and tell ourselves that we're okay, we're never going to be okay. And like Naya said, our thoughts are keeping us stuck. That's the realest thing that I tell people. We got to learn how to shift our thought process. And as people work with me, and I'm sure work with you, they don't hit the lottery, they don't get a new house or new car, their mindset starts to shift. And that's such a powerful thing. That's the one thing that we have control over, that we're not utilizing. A lot of us haven't been taught to, or don't understand the power in it. And so I really want people to understand the power and the mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very powerful thing. Because if you tell
Mhm.
yourself you can't do it, you won't.
You won't do it. Yeah, your mind's like, okay, okay, Naya, you say we can't do it. I guess we ain't doing
You
it.
you
It
start to
literally
no,
happens like
and get
that.
ready to
Yep,
not do it.
yep, yep.
Yeah,
This was
absolutely.
dope. I want you to tell people how they can reach you and how they can find your books. Now, I didn't do it. I'm sure it's not in print. We can't find that anywhere, right?
No, you probably can't find I didn't do it anywhere. Absolutely not. But you guys can find me on Instagram at author_Naya_B, my website, naya-b.com. I have a blog. There's links to all of that there. I do IG Live, free group therapy every Thursday at 6. We're taking a break right now for the summer, but for the past 2 years, I've given a free platform for people to come on and actually get free therapy. So you guys can catch the playback on my IGTV because all of them are there still. So have
Except for
fun,
that
enjoy,
last
and
one, I'm like, when I read um, I noticed that with some things I post, Instagram blocks it on my mental
yeah,
health page,
yeah,
and it's crazy because I see it so clear, and we sit on these platforms all day. We don't understand they're intentionally controlling our mind. Naya did a
absolutely.
mental health live that they said, oh, sorry, we're trying to protect our audience, something like that, where it was blocked. So
Yeah.
like really be intentional about where you're spending your time. You
Mhm.
got people like her and I out here, and they will shadow ban us because we out here
Mhm.
trying to give that healing. And so, but
Yes.
thank God we have our own platforms, right? So like there's other
Yes.
ways to look for information. So I really think it's important for people to be intentional about getting information that's going to help them, and not just on social media. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I was disappointed in it. I'm like, here I am teaching people how to cope with these mass shootings and racial injustices, and I'm spitting facts about things that's going on, and they're like, this doesn't protect the community. No, it doesn't
Yeah.
protect your pockets, but okay.
Yeah.
So
And people will
let it
realize,
go.
like, let me be
I said,
intentional about my
anytime
time
you
and get off Instagram. They don't want that.
I say anytime you allow live streams of killings and people can twerk, they can say the N word over and over again, but I get
Crazy.
blocked because I'm telling people how to cope. It's a problem. It's a
Yeah.
problem, but okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
you guys can find me on my website, Facebook, Naya B. I am all over the place. You can Google me. I am everywhere. So I hope you guys can. Oh, and I have a podcast, doing it with Naya B. You can find me anywhere, Pandora, Spotify. I'm all over the place. I am on any platform where you streaming podcasts. You can find me.
Now, the podcast, right, and that's why I created my own platform is because social media had blocked something where I was doing on Periscope. It's a platform that's no longer here, but um, and I realized like, oh, I got to create my own. But tell people how you do your self care in the middle of all of this chaos.
Man, listen, I think it's important for us to identify our own quote unquote love languages because we're
Mhm.
so busy thinking about the other people. I think we need to think about what makes us feel good as well and be intentional about doing that. So, my love language is acts of service and physical touch. So, those are my main ones. So, I am very intentional about going somewhere where I'm going to get served and making sure that I have, some type of feeling of nurture or comfort against my skin, whether it's a really hot shower with a lot of pressure, whether it's a long hot bath, whether it's a massage. So I am very intentional about getting massages regularly. I have my memberships. I do go to restaurants and be served. I love for somebody to bring me a hot food, a good drink, and I'm gonna sit there and enjoy that. I will do that by myself. I just love somebody bringing me something. I do a lot of shopping online because I like people bringing my gifts to my door. It's another act of service there for you. I do a lot of writing. I love comedy. I like to laugh.
Yeah.
So I am big on TikTok. Yes, I have a sense of humor. I do a lot of silly stuff. I realize that that's important to me. So I'm big on going to comedy shows. I would just randomly look to see who's coming to a comedy club, and I would just buy a ticket and I would go and I would sit there. And I am big on just enjoying people, so I do like to date. Now, of course, I've been married a couple of times, but outside of that, I'm very intentional about dating. I like to get dressed up, go out, have a great time with adults, and have good
Nice.
conversation. So all of
Nice.
that is intentional self care for me.
Yeah.
Playing in makeup, teaching myself a new skill because the brain you have to keep applying new information to it. So I'm doing things like learning how to play with Adobe Cloud on the regular or learning how to, again, play in makeup or try new hairstyles. I'm always doing something like that because it really, really keeps me distracted from all the other things that's going on in the world.
Nice. Oh, thank you for sharing. You're so awesome. Thank you for
Yeah,
your
thank you.
transparency and just like I always I mean, I love talking to everybody, but talking to other therapists is like, oh, it's like, oh, you get it. We in the struggle.
Yes, absolutely. This is so cool. Yay. I gotta have you
um
on my show.
Yes,
We
yes,
gotta
I
do
would
this.
love it. I would love it. I appreciate you because you're amazing, and people like you is when I used to go live on social media before I did the podcast, and I would try to talk about this stuff. They would be like, "Oh, but you're a therapist." I said, "You have no idea. Like, it's not about me being a therapist. The therapist is my job." And having people on share their stories, especially you, with all of the things that you're doing and the things that how it took you to get to this point. I just want people to have hope, that healing is available to them regardless of what your experience has been. Healing is available to you. Like, that's my message for people. So thank you for helping me
No
spread that
problem. Thank
message.
you. You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. This is amazing. So thank you.